So I'm still here on the Fighting Eye, and in the first episode I talk about its World War II career, and if you haven't seen it, go back and check it out. But today's episode, we're on to the Intrepid's NASA career as a recovery vessel and her 3 deployments in Vietnam. So let's get after it on the other side of this intro. Now, these models here clearly depict how the Fighting Eye was overhauled and modernized with that new angled flight deck, but I believe being the first carrier to ever have an angled flight deck. And this one side by side right here shows what the Fighting Eye looked like in World War II. See how her flight deck is just straight as an arrow. Pretty cool. I love these old pictures. Look at the entire crew, essentially, is what it feels like anyways, in this photo, watching as the first ever jet aircraft was launched off of the Fighting Eye's deck using that steam catapult. Now, in the early 60s, NASA and the race to the moon was officially on, and in 1962 she became a member of the recovery fleet for NASA, in which helicopters from the Intrepid recovered astronaut Scott Carpenter in his Project Mercury capsule. Early 65, she began preparing for her role in another NASA recovery, which was NASA's first manned flight, Gemini 3. Gemini 3 splashed down less than 50 miles from the USS Intrepid. A helicopter from the Fighting Eye once again took off to recover astronauts Gus Grissom and John Young. So from 1945 to 1965, in plus or minus a few years obviously before and after, she has always been at the front pages of history. Now, this is something I did not expect to come across here on the Fighting Eye. This is the pilot escalator, and this is only to be used by pilots trying to get from their briefing room up to the flight deck and into their planes as quick as they can. And as a pilot, you could be doing this up to half a dozen times a day and carrying all your combat gear. I would imagine it's pretty tiring going up numerous flights of stairs, so they just put it in its own private escalator. Pretty ingenious, really. So these are custom, almost look like homemade patches for all the different areas of people doing their duties aboard the ship. Barbershop gets a patch. Looks like electricians. Keep the ship afloat. Oh, that'd be the goal. As well as it looks like some sort of fighter squadron had their patch there. Look at these old pictures. Look at that picture. The Fighting Eye in dry dock, and then her getting out of dry dock and hitting the high seas. Looks clean too. Now here we go. In April of 66, all the way through February 69, obviously with some breaks in between those 3 years, the Fighting Eye was once again steamed into the Pacific for offensive operations, this time serving 3 deployments off of the coast of Vietnam. type of combat conditions the Intrepid would face off the coast of Vietnam was very, very different than what she faced during World War II. There were no kamikaze aircraft, trying to lodge themselves into the side or into the deck of the Fighting Eye. There was no attacks on the carrier itself. A lot of it was getting planes in the air, fighter aircraft in the air, to help support ground units or to try to shoot down opposing MiGs from the Vietnamese.
Americans know, although others appear to forget, the risk of spreading conflict. We still seek no wider war.
Had two different duty stations, and they were legit stations where you could always find the aircraft carrier off of Vietnam. And as you can see here, you have Dixie Station down south, closer to off of Saigon, and Yankee Station is pretty much just east of the DMZ. At one point, the city of Hanoi in North Vietnam at the time was the most well-defended city in the world, with over 10,000 anti-aircraft guns, hundreds of missiles from sand batteries. So this is a really, really cool piece of history here. This is called Triple Sticks, and they have a whole little section here. And in 1967, for about 5-6 months, there were 4 young officers that were all fighter pilots, and they all shared the same stateroom. And they had a shared diary, which is here at the USS Intrepid Museum. And the diary captured their feats, fears, and frustrations, as well as the shipboard antics, including throwing parties and playing pranks. So this is pretty cool. So this is a picture of Lieutenant Tony Nargi, who was a fighter pilot. He shot down a North Vietnamese MiG-21 on September 19th, 1968 during his 111th combat mission. It's a lot of sorties. He took his opponent down with a Sidewinder missile and scored second hits on a second MiG using his 20mm gun. And this here is the actual Triple Sticks stateroom where the 4 junior officer fighter pilots stayed on the ship during their deployment to Vietnam. Man, if only these walls could talk. If you're a statistical person, sweet poster here, a deployment by the numbers, 68 to 69, 90,000 miles traveled, 3.2 million pounds of food prepared, 3 million pounds of clothes cleaned, 250 days away from the United States, and 12.1 million pounds of ordnance expended, and 9,300 aircraft launches. You want to talk about an aircraft carrier just constantly staying busy, which every single one of them does. That is a pretty sweet lighter. Now, throughout the USS Intrepid's entire career, more than 50,000 men served aboard her, and over 250 were killed while on board. So speaking of accidental deaths during flight operations, this is a reproduction of a Western Union telegram from August of '66. It says, Richard Moose Moran was a pilot in Squadron VA-15. On August 7th, 1966, Moran approached Intrepid for landing. Men on the ship witnessed his aircraft descend and then crash into the ocean. Now, a massive, massive aspect of the Vietnam War is MIA and POWs. And a lot of the POWs from the American side were a lot of pilots. And what did the Fighting Eye launch off her deck? Pilots, which include 3 of Intrepid's fighter pilots became POWs: Wilson Key, Ed Martin, and Peter Schoffel. There was obviously a massive drive, not just within the military, but as well as at home, for the United States to find their missing in action, as well as to bring their prisoners of war home. during Vietnam, this was always going to happen, I think. Any type of protest at home was also being mirrored in Vietnam as well. And, of course, anti-war protest marches were strong in the States, and they were strong on board. In October 1967, 4 Intrepid sailors who became known as the Intrepid Four deserted while the ship was on liberty in Japan. They traveled to Sweden via the Soviet Union. Their story made front-page news, which I'm not surprised by. Obviously, this talks about the end of Operation Rolling Thunder from President LBJ on November 1st, 1968. And when that announcement was made, the Fighting Eye was actually on the line, and the ship spent one final period conducting airstrikes mostly over Laos. And on December 27th of 1968, the Intrepid left the line for the last time and began the long journey home. And of course, they have some very famous photographs, such as Marines helping some Vietnamese civilians over the walls into the U.S. Embassy, right around the last few days before Saigon fell. As well as pushing Huey helicopters off the decks of naval vessels so other Huey helicopters flown by South Vietnamese military pilots could land and try to secure an evacuation out of Vietnam. So it's funny, I didn't think of this. Upon every time the Intrepid came home from Vietnam, which was 3 times, the homecomings were rather unique because for Navy personnel, you came right into a naval base, which shielded them from the protesters who often gathered at commercial airports to confront returning veterans from other branches of service. Now, on March 15th, 1974, the USS Intrepid was decommissioned for the final time. And in August of 1982, she opened up as a museum ship here on Pier 82 on the Hudson River. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Remember to smash that subscribe button, give the episode a like, and comment down below. Let me know what type of history you would like to see on the channel. I'll see you all next week at the same time, same day, same channel. I do have some experience in using a toilet with no walls, just a line of them. All I can say is at least these have doors on them, so that's something.